Good afternoon, it's Lee Cassidy from Tactile Technology, and today we're going to do our Enterprise Wednesday, and we've got our guest to join us, which is Erikjan Franssen from Diamanti. So I'll just bring Eric into the stream. How are you doing, Eric?
Hi, Lee. How are you?
Not too bad. So you're going to drive most of this because you're going to give us an update on Diamanti and the changes with the product, with the release of version 3 of the product line. So if I bring up these slides then, and I shall leave it to you.
Yeah, so let me start with a backdrop. I mean, you and I have had many conversations about the future of Kubernetes and the future of containerized applications, distributed applications, and how this development supports agile development of applications, agile release of applications, faster development times, and make enterprises more agile and ready towards the future. And I think what you can see in the market right now is that notion is being broadly adopted as a great promise. And then Kubernetes is the engine or the orchestration layer or the engine layer that makes that all happen, right? That binds all these developments and all these elements together. And Diamanti, as I explained before, we have been in this market for a very long time. Our founders came from the hyperconverged infrastructure side of the house, but already figured out 4 to 5 years ago that the future was going to be distributed applications, Kubernetes operated, or one of the predecessors of Kubernetes operated, but then containers was the way forward, and that the infrastructure layer needed to be able to support that, right?
Yeah.
And that was a very, very important thing. And we've always dedicated our full platform and our full stack to actually enhance this cloud native development while giving the people an option to deploy it in the enterprise or deploy it in the public cloud. So that has been traditionally our product portfolio, which we've kind of developed towards hybrid cloud orchestration, application acceleration, and then obviously hyperconverged infrastructure with all the storage and networking features that you might expect from a hyperconverged infrastructure story. So this has been our bread and butter, but of course we've been developing our product. But let me give you a bit of a background on why we are delivering what we're delivering right now, because that actually comes into, and it's great that I'm here on an Enterprise Wednesday, right? Because this is really an enterprise problem. Why do these cloud transformation projects in the enterprise stall? And I'm not talking about your new startup, greenfield startup, where you're from a greenfield perspective, you deploy applications, develop applications, and you can decide your entire infrastructure stack, your entire application stack, and your entire security and compliance landscape yourself. I'm talking about the enterprise situation where deploying these new types of technologies provides complications. And why is that? And we've done some investigation in that over the past few months. It's because it's a broader set of applications that you're talking about. We're not talking about only greenfield applications. We're talking about brownfield applications as well. There's a very big difference between stateless and stateful applications. And by that meaning applications that migrate or live with the data, or applications that live without the data. And traditionally, what you see, especially in large enterprises where they adopt containers, the first application they do that is with stateless applications, because that's quite easy, right? If there's no interdependency on the data itself and the application, then moving and migrating and containerizing or distributing an application like that is super easy, actually. Yeah. And then obviously there's this lightweight versus data intensive. So you gotta be able to cover that all. And then the infrastructure options. Let's be very honest. There is the public cloud is the way forward. You can see in all the reports, public cloud adoption is magnificent, especially with this current pandemic going on. Public cloud is here to stay, is here to grow, and the large public cloud vendors and even some contesters on the market in Europe, we've got a few of them, are contesting the American cloud providers, but they're here to stay. But the reality inside of any financial institution, healthcare facility, any larger enterprise, any government or government organization, is there's always a combination of on-premise infrastructure, new infrastructure, on-premise existing infrastructure, public cloud, and then that multi-cloud hybrid cloud approach. And that approach won't immediately change. There will not be a full migration into public cloud all of a sudden. So you need to be able to manage those broader sets of infrastructure at the same time with the same experience for your end customers or your end users or your application developers. And then last but
I think, like, from the public cloud initially, a lot of people were thinking of it's a way of getting away from that purchase process where you'd actually go through procurement every 3 years and through purchase your next kit and onwards, and they saw public cloud as being a way to resolve that. But I think now people are seeing it more to actually provide more elastic capability, more agile development capabilities. So I think there's other reasons why people are going down that route.
Oh, and absolutely. And I say I'm 100%, as I just said, I'm a 100% supporter of the public cloud. I mean, I couldn't have been working unless my organization wasn't working on some version of public cloud, right? And that counts for a lot of us. But what I'm saying is that in an enterprises that we're talking to, and the enterprises that we're dealing with, they are in some sort of version of a migration between on-premise and public cloud, usually driven by either cost drivers or, as you said, agility drivers, as you said, elasticity drivers. But they are always having to run some version of an on-premise environment, whether it be for regulatory compliance or any other reasons or security reasons. They need to be able to manage those environments.
Yeah.
And then the last but not least, and this is a real big thing, and I know that the Cloud Native Foundation that manages the whole development around all the cloud native developments and everything that's are surrounding that, there is multiple components from multiple vendors. And every day there's a new startup or a new GitLab type of experiment or a new GitLab commit coming out with a component that adds to the simplicity or adds to the complexity, however you want to see it, of the Kubernetes environment. And so you are dealing with multiple components from multiple vendors. And then be honest, I've mentioned this before, it requires advanced Kubernetes skills. And a lot of people are telling they're having Kubernetes skills, and on LinkedIn, it's a badge of honor. I think there's a total about 2.5 million people that have some sort of a Kubernetes skill on their LinkedIn. But then really having these advanced Kubernetes skills is a challenge that's hard to find. And enterprises have to deal with that because you're competing as an enterprise against that talent that has the option to go to the next cool startup or join your enterprise and deal with the situation there. And then all of the above basically makes it difficult to scale and manage this in an enterprise environment. And I think that's kind of where Diamanti has been working towards, is with all the background knowledge that we have of the underlying infrastructure, with all the capabilities we've released to manage public and on-premise and multi-cloud and hybrid cloud environments. I think what we've now done with our latest set of releases is come out with a capability that will help customers in every area I've been discussing before. And I think that will drive a big change. Especially in the way these capabilities can be consumed and the benefits it can bring. And I can, from a demand perspective, I see a massive uptake here in Europe into requests coming out of there, whether it's coming from large managed service providers that are wanting to provide some sort of version of Kubernetes or cloud native as a service, or enterprises that are dealing with that migration path from on-premise to public cloud and want to offer their application developers a singular experience. So I think that's what we're dealing with. So maybe I can share some of that in the next slide.
Okay, so I'll move on to the next slide there. So
what have we cut those offerings up into, right? I mean, and this is important to understand. What is the difference that we make, especially if you look at the bottom layer. Number 4 is what we've always been doing, a hyper-converged infrastructure family that includes everything from an end-to-end data plane software, a hardware offload card, and our Spectra management plane software. But if we now look at how we go to market with our products right now, we have cut these products up into different pieces. And the first piece on top level is one of our flagship products is the Ultimate Data Plane software, which is basically an end-to-end data and storage management solution for Kubernetes and Red Hat OS. But it actually includes enterprise-ready storage features, such as DRDP, snapshotting, asynchronous replication. And it allows you to run it in a cloud and on-premise facilities as a service for you. So now you have an enterprise storage capability, separated out, dedicated for Kubernetes, dealing with storage persistency, that you can consume as a separate product, and you can deploy it in any cloud, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Google, whether it's Azure, you can deploy it anywhere.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing by it is, we have recently done some unpublished, because these things are unpublished yet, but they'll come out soon, some performance benchmarks. Even with our software layer, due to the unique configuration, we're already able to accelerate databases or certain applications by 7 to 8 times by only utilizing our data plane software. So even in there, you can do tremendous optimization of your underlying infrastructure, and you can do amazing things towards your enterprise environment when you start using our Ultimate Data Plane software in that respect. So I think that's a killer offering. It's available as a service. It will become available in all the cloud catalogs and to consume as a separate environment.
So that's giving you the enterprise class capabilities for the storage that you're utilizing, but I would assume it's also giving the ability to migrate workloads as well between services, on-premise and services as well.
Yeah, and then including the data. So as I said before, the stateful applications that are really dependent on the data, you're now able to do those migrations, including the data, including all the underlying layers that are required. And Diamanti's Ultima basically takes care of everything for you.
Okay.
Then another development is really interesting, because right now in the market, you see large companies like VMware talking about SmartNICs. You hear Amazon talking about Nitro. You hear NVIDIA talking about DPU, data processing units, inside of, which is actually ultimately, funny choice of words there, a hardware offload card. And Diamanti has been developing that hardware offload card for ages, right? And we've been around there. We already saw that the offload card is the critical component to accelerate applications and simplify the relationship between the application and the underlying infrastructure, and help accelerate those applications. So we've been going to market with this since October. This has a massive uptick because a lot of people in the market are starting to talk about it. I think one of the CEOs of NVIDIA went on and said, because of the distributed applications and containerized workloads, every single infrastructure component, whether it runs public cloud or it runs something in an on-premise environment, will be fulfilled with some sort of version of a hardware offload card. Now, the amazing thing with Diamanti is that because we've had 5 years ahead in development, we are now coming out at the end of the quarter, we're coming out with a single card. So it used to be 2 cards, network offload card, storage offload card. And you can see that a lot of these vendors that are going into there are solving the network problem. So there's a lot of focus with Nitro as well, solving the network problem. But there's a little focus on solving the storage problem and taking care of storage acceleration. Yeah. And what we're coming out is effectively a single card that you can plug into any piece of x86 standard infrastructure. So it doesn't need to be dedicated hardware built for Diamanti. You can plug it in and start benefiting from the offload capability, because it will have built-in NVMe storage, will have the built-in network offload, and will be built-in storage offload. We've done comparisons on SQL databases, and I think I'll share the link with you, and you can share it. I think you've shared already that on a report that we've compared that with SQL databases, where we compared ourselves to Amazon Nitro or some of the other vendors in the market. The acceleration that we could bring and the capabilities that we could bring were massive. And again, this product is now out as a separate product, consumable in combination with our data plane software. But we can effectively go out and effectively push these cards into any existing piece of x86 infrastructure that you might have hanging around, which doesn't need you to fulfill a complete infrastructure refresh or get all your infrastructure replaced in order to consume that. So I think a very interesting capability there.
So that might be useful for, say, a large-scale MSP who wants to
large-scale MSP. Yeah. So I mean, we're now seeing a lot of interest from large-scale MSPs. One of them is a real contestant on the public cloud market, is really interested, and some of them are based out of mainland Europe, very much interested in these offload cards. Then again, there's also enterprises that run IO intensive workloads. Think of high frequency trading floors inside of financial institutions. that are very I/O intensive and a very I/O driven use cases, and they can benefit from the Ultima hardware offload card.
Okay.
And then last but not least, our spectrum management plane software. And what I will do in the footnotes of this video, I will share a bunch of videos that we've now made, by the way, on all these different subjects, but especially around the spectrum management plane software. Our capability is massively upgraded. So we're now able to fully manage multi-cluster, multi-cloud with a single user experience for the application developer. So you are now able to easy install, manage setup, but manage clusters of Kubernetes, switch on, switch off, combine Diamanti clusters with non-Diamanti clusters, run up clusters inside of the public cloud, run DR or run your test dev in a public cloud. Then the application becomes IO intensive, migrate it to your on-premise environment because of cost savings, or do it the other way around. Run test dev run test dev in a public cloud A, but run production in public cloud B. So think about Rancher there, but a lot better because of those capabilities that we brought in, and that's now consumable in the Azure. It's becoming available in the Azure store. It will be available in the Amazon store soon. Google to follow suit, but already the software is available, and you can consume that from any place in any cloud.
That sounds good.
And then obviously I just mentioned, as our larger enterprise customers and some of the managed service providers in the market are still benefiting from the continued development, which is effectively all together. If you want that end-to-end data plane software combined with the storage offload, unique management plane software, and then benefit from the capabilities on the D20 hyperconverged infrastructure family, that is still available. The great thing about that is it's really plug and go. It's 15 minutes to value, and tons of customers are benefiting from that. Okay.
Next slide.
Yeah, please. Because effectively, what is our secret sauce in that, right? Because it's what do I feel that I'm enthusiastic about? So let me start with the latest, because I think it's the most important and sometimes the most undervalued in these technical presentations. Of course, it's the people of Diamanti, right? It's the organization that drives this. And effectively, what you can see us at, and as an average enterprise, see us as an 0900 Kubernetes, right? Kubernetes in itself is an open source project. So if you are running Kubernetes itself in production without having any other distribution on top of it, you are dependent on your GitHub buddy that is working at Apple and maybe to resolve an issue for you, right? But what we do as Diamanti, we take our responsibility across all the layers of the infrastructure, including the Kubernetes layer. So our people are developing this. I must say the development inside of Diamanti are unprecedented. We have major releases and major adoptions of new technologies coming up almost every month. And then a month later GA, a month later GA, a month later GA, and customers already being able to benefit from it. So if you're looking at a dedicated vendor that helps to improve the landscape in the Kubernetes space, I think it's an amazing place to be. Another one I wanted to share here is the secure multi-tenancy that's built in, and that's relevant, might be sounding relevant to managed service providers, but it is also relevant to large institutions that have big separations between departments, have big separations between groups of users, right? So you're now able to distinguish your pieces of infrastructure via looking at user groups, various namespaces for separate user groups, making sure that you can divide up this incredible, powerful infrastructure into different components for different departments. And I think that's scalable to thousands and thousands of nodes. Effectively, we're only limited by the power of Kubernetes, right? So as long as Kubernetes continues to grow, we can continue to grow. And I think that's a very relevant thing, that we basically designed that for an as a service deployment. So if you're an operations department or an IT operations department running these capabilities as a service and want an easy button and want to be helped in that space, I think Diamanti is a really right place to be, right? And I've just managed, I said, listen, the software-based hardware offload, right? I've just mentioned it. Only with the ultimate data plane software, we already managed to 6 to 7 times of performance increases towards standard cloud offerings that you have on the market. And I think that's unprecedented, because that will help you to drive down public cloud costs, because you need to consume less to run the same application. But it will also increase your end user experience, because your applications are running a lot faster. And think about the power of that in analytics. Think about the power of that in high frequency trading. Think about the power of that in AI type of use cases. It could be really great for you.
Yep.
And last but not least, obviously, the cloud native data plane, allowing you to deploy enterprise features such as snapshotting, synchronous, asynchronous replication on any piece of infrastructure that you want under it. Right? You are no longer dependent on the Diamanti's infrastructure. You can basically manage any infrastructure component there, and provide that enterprise features that you're used to, that you're normally needing to buy separate products for. And that all combined into one, I think, makes Diamanti's proposition really, really relevant for the market. Maybe the next slide shows you some of these. Because what we do like to do is, and you might figure that out from my story here, we do like to brag about our solutions, which I think is fair. We're proud to our company. But what we've been trying to do, what we've invested heavily in, is do independent researches on our capabilities versus others. And those could be researches that we've done in combination with customers, but there's a ton of them that we also have independent reports. On MongoDB, we have an IDC report comparing MongoDB on Diamanti's hyperconverged platform versus running it in the standard Atlas cloud. So if you're any MongoDB listener here running MongoDB, having problems with cost or having problems with performance, we've got independent reports providing that. Recently, we came out with a SQL Server, SQL 2019 report, right? How do you accelerate those applications? And you can see the massive cost savings and also massive performance increases that Diamanti will bring to these unique capabilities. The Italian bank Intesa, where we've reduced 80% of their footprint to run Elasticsearch on. Those are really relevant numbers if you're dealing in these enterprise situations. And I think that's where we've contributed heavily. A bit of a future outlook. If you look at the capabilities that are coming out, full integration. We've now fully integrated also with anybody that runs Red Hat OpenShift. If you're on Red Hat OpenShift 4.x and now 4.5, 4.6, we're fully supporting that. We're integrating into the whole Red Hat OpenShift kind of community. So I think that's a very, very interesting area where we're developing ourselves and continue to support that community. So the community that is not necessarily wanting to adopt the full open source version of Kubernetes, but still wants to benefit from Kubernetes and all the capabilities around it. I think that's a very much of a supported product. I've mentioned the single card due to come out end of this month, GA a month later, where the single card can now be put into any of the pieces of infrastructure that people ever have laying around. And then last but not least, the continued development of our Ultimate Data Plane and our Spectrum Management Plane software, giving you that single user experience across the clouds wherever you deploy it, and not making you dependent on a single Kubernetes distribution or a single cloud provider for your critical applications, which in the end will help save cost and in the end will drive flexibility inside of the enterprise. So all in all, a lot of words about Diamanti, a lot of stuff happening, but I think a very relevant story to mention here.
I would assume as well you're going to get a lot of performance benefits from a people side, because you're using a single set of tools to deploy and manage and operate across all the environments, rather than having to use different native tools each time as you go between them.
Yeah. Absolutely, and that's clearly something that benefits, because right now you're educating people, especially in this landscape, you're educating people from those, as I mentioned before, right, these fragmented solutions. Right now you have a single user experience. One thing I like to mention here, because we do that in cooperation with you guys, of course, quarterly, is if people want to have a sneak peek into this, we have a remote instance together running with you guys at Textile Technology, where we have the latest versions of our software running inside of a data center, and customers and prospects that are interested in testing out different of these components have accessibility to that, right? And I think it's an open It's an open invite for either a public demo, but even if you want to drive a test run on a single application or on a certain database and see what that benefit could bring, it's a really open invite to start doing that, because I think it makes sense to test whether my blue eyes are really trustworthy, or whether to test out some of these features, and absolutely 100% confident, and it's an open invite to test it out without having go through the hassle of on-premise implementations or bespoke cloud implementations. We have those applications running, and we have the platform running inside of a tactile data center. So I think that could be very interesting for you.
Yeah, definitely. So we're quite happy to get people set up in there and do some testing so they can actually understand the performance they're going to get, and also the experience that they'll get of using the infrastructure.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I've had multiple conversations where people run through this experience. They run through a performance test, they run through a functional test, and they check out how things look. They deploy a piece of infrastructure inside of an Amazon cloud. They deploy a piece of infrastructure inside of a Diamanti server, and see that is a single experience. And I think usually that talks more than PowerPoint slides. Yeah. So an open invite to start testing it out.
Sounds good. Anything else you want to add before we shut ourselves off today?
No, I think we're all good in this respect. We'll continue to develop as we are. Diamanti is especially in Europe, is growing. Multiple sets of customers onboarding right now. Multiple managed service providers that are starting to offer Kubernetes as a service. So a really interesting capability, and an open invite for people to just test out some of these stories I've just mentioned here, and figure out. I showed the slide where port works, but we're better. Well, let's show that. We think we're Nitro, but we're better. Well, let's show that. We think we're Rancher, but then better. Let's show that, and get that going.
Okay. Well, thanks ever so much for your input today. That's been great, and hopefully we speak again soon.
Thanks, Lee.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Bye-bye.